Welcome, good afternoon everybody, great to have you here and a warm welcome. There's going to be a test after this and you better remember everything. We had a day to talk about assessment and there's really solid research to show that quality feedback is one of the strongest drivers of improving student performance. And giving the right feedback at the right time really helps children and anybody improve. And if you think of a golf coach giving advice to somebody learning golf, it's having that coach in front of you and telling you, right, bend your knees, shoulders down, head there, this way, and giving you that feedback right away gives you the feedback at the right time to be able to improve your golf swing. And so too, for our children, if we want them to improve academically and in every area of life, are we giving the right feedback at the right time to help them improve their performance? And in education, assessment drives teaching, which drives learning. And if your assessment is, right, there's going to be a test on the 20 rivers of South Africa, remember these 20 names, and I'm going to test you to memorize the names, then that's how you'll teach it, and that's how you'll learn it. But if you're teaching water issues and water safety in South Africa, well then it's a different kind of question, and it'll be a different kind of assessment. So quality assessment drives quality teaching, quality learning, and that's what we had to talk about today. And as we prepare our children for a very different world of study and very different careers in the future, we need to relook at how we assess and how we teach so that they can learn the skills to succeed in universities and the careers and the workplaces of the future. So assessering is actually hard van goeie opvoeding. And we're really excited to just share with you something of our educational philosophy. And we welcome Celri and Gary, and for many of you, Gary's new, he just started at the beginning of this term. That's Dr. Gary Robson, and he's going to be heading up our high school program, and we're really excited to have him on board and have him join our team. And looking forward to his contribution to taking the program forward. So, welcome.
Right, thank you so much for coming. It's so lovely to have all of us here. We can just sit and have a nice talk about what we do and how we do it. So, the approach that we're following is the midway between what kindy started and what primary started to grow, and we are continuing in middle school and we are driving through to high school. And Gary and I will be talking to you, sort of interrupting each other when we want to and can. Okay, so this is assessing a journey. So assessment is about looking at the whole process. When we were at school, what was assessed? Content. And you had to go and sit down at the end of the year and you had to pass that exam. Nothing else that you did throughout the year counted. It helped you through, but everything else, that's okay. He's part of the family. So nothing that you did really showed outside of what that test did or what that test tested on that day. And you may have had a hectic headache. You may have had an emotional upheaval. You could have broken up with your boyfriend or girlfriend that day, and now you had to go and write a test. And that was the culmination. So that is product over process. We do process and product. And I think that was something that was beautifully illustrated in kindy and in our primary talks to say that this is how we empower and enable our children to become thinkers and problem solvers. Because we do not need people to remember for us anymore because we've got tools for it. We don't have to remember everything anymore. There's just too much to remember. And if you go into the workplace, we need people who are thinking and who are doing and who can see things are going in this direction and I can plan that way. And that's how we plan, and that is how we teach, and that's how our kids learn. So ek gaan 'n bietjie oorskakel Afrikaans toe. Is almal gemaklik met Afrikaans? How comfortable are you with Afrikaans?
We learn.
You're learning. I'll keep it short. Ek sal dit kort hou. So dis 'n leerreis van assessering. Dit is waar ons mekaar leer ken en hoe die kinders hulle vir ons wys wat hulle leer en hoe hulle leer. So the children are showing their learning. They're making it visible for us throughout this journey. So and I need to warn you, there's a lot of reading here. This is not the standard kind of presentation, because I'm going to share this with you so that you can take it home and go and have a look at it afterwards, because my voice won't be there to help. Okay, so I'm not going to read that for you. You can read it afterwards if you want to. We're turning 2 next year. Only 2. And they shared some photographs the other day in our group where the school was, where the school is today. And if you just look at the physical surroundings, the changes that have happened from then to now, it's phenomenal. And those changes are also evident in what we are doing in middle school. So we were in classrooms in the beginning, then we sort of had a huge lab shift, and then we moved into admin that you all saw on the little group that we shared. And all of these experiments were there to see how we can make this learning journey more visible, more concrete for us. And so that the learning and the way we teach and where we learn all speak together and it's all streamlined. So turning to, we're all building this still together and there's still a lot to do. And we're so grateful to have Gary because he is concretizing a lot of what we have had that was in loose little blocks. We can now draw together because high school is finally forming with 2 grades coming in. With grade 9 and 10, I'm going to be simplifying this year. So we keep it real. So we plan. Our planning drives our assessment and assessment drives learning. So where Andy said assessment drives learning, that's true, but our planning drives that. And our planning comes from our curriculum that we put together. It is our Green School curriculum, our scope and sequence that we use, and we have high expectations. So when we say product, or process over product, or process and product, we measure every step of the way, and we expect a high-end product of that child, the best that they can present to us. So that means, how do you get there? So that's the big thing that we want to do. So we've got milestones that we work in to bring our feedback circle into play during this whole journey that we have. And we have baseline assessments at the beginning, so the kids set goals for themselves, and then we have baselines. And then where are you now? So that's the first assessment we usually do at the beginning of a new topic or at the beginning of the term. Where are you now? Where do you want to be? How are you going to get there? And then the child doesn't measure themselves against the people in their class or the grade or the group. It is, I am here, I need to get there. And we measure where you should be envisioned, where the average standard is there, but we don't ever have that situation where you have the child measuring themselves against the standard. We know where to push them, where to support and where to extend. So you can get to that level where, yes, you've mastered what we wanted you to do. How much further do you want to go? Where do we want to go with this? How far do you want to go? And that's something that we're really exploring at the moment, and how to make that really concrete as well. Then those stops along the way, those milestones, I'm going to just show you over here. This is our scope and sequence, or an example. This is our rubric. It's our core rubric that we use to design all our other rubrics from. Because we don't have tests and memos, we use rubrics. And they are crafted according to a set 5-point scale. And that means that every rubric that we customize for our subject and for that activity is built around those growth points. And we get feedback along those. Gary is going to talk about the high school and the
Okay, so we don't have a 5 system. We've actually subdivided the sections. So each of the grades, for example, A, we do an A plus and an A minus. So we've got a much wider range of assessment rankings. And then obviously down at the bottom where we go below 59 is a failure. So a pass is 60%. It's not like in the traditional IEP or DBE schools where you get 30 or 40%. Okay, and we generally not expecting any failures because we have so many of these assessments and interventions that hopefully by the time we get to the end of the semester, or the end of the course, we would have remediated so there won't be anyone lagging behind. That's the whole aim of this.
So we are busy putting into words what that looks like throughout the school. This is already happening in kindy, it's already happening in primary, and it's already happening with us, and we're concretizing that as well. Now we're bringing it into the language that we use with each other and with our community as well. So our learning journey looks like this. This is not the exciting part. This is where I get excited. So we start by inspiring them. Once we've inspired them and gotten their buy-in, because they're immersed in the theme that we're busy with, we get them to start wondering, and that's where they craft questions. So when they craft their questions, they are beginning to shape how they are going to learn in this space. Once they've got their questions, we come to a big hairy question or the driving question, the BHQ. They can then go and they can craft their own sub-questions to drive their research. So it's everything builds on the previous step. So your learning happens in a very structured way. So it's not just you go and play and ask a question and come and tell us about it, yay, great, you got a question. There's really a lot of structure to create space for a lot of creativity and a lot of freedom and a lot of student-driven input in their learning. Once they've wandered, they explore the research part, then they have to go and plan. And from grade 6 and 7, we still give them a lot of structure. We still help them a lot on how to plan for different scenarios. From grade 8 onwards, we sort of stand back a little bit and we let them play around, but there's still structure and they still have to go and apply the skills that they've learned. For example, how to sort out your sources, which, you know, try and get a primary source. We've got so many people around us that can actually speak into your learning. Get to the primary source first, then go to a secondary source, then go to the end. Okay? Do you want to add something? Yeah.
This is not something that's foreign to us. We do it every day. This is how we do our thought processes. So if you're planning a trip overseas or going to the grocery store, you will follow each of these steps. That's a logical way to plan things. So that's what we teach them, is how to think and how to plan effectively, which is what we do every second of our day. So it's not something foreign to us.
Yeah. So once they've done their planning, they're going to actually make the artifact that they have to come and show their learning. So they can also choose how they are going to present their learning to us. At the end of each of these steps, there's a reflection point or a share point where they either share it with peers and with their teachers or just to their peers, and they have to give feedback and receive feedback. And that is also a skill that we need to entrench, and that's why it's there so often. If you reflect at this point, yes, I am on the right track, no, I'm deviating, or yes, I'm deviating, but it's actually pushing the idea forward. So that's a good thing. That also gives us an organic way of doing our scaffolding, because now we can see, okay, this child is really, really not getting the skill down, so this is the structures that we need to put in line to get them to the skill. This kid is flying, they're really way past where we wanted them to be, so how are we going to support that growth over there? And then you have the kids that are working at a different pace in the middle. So that helps us provide that support, like Gary said. You won't have a child that's going to miss out on a step here, and because that step was missed, fail over there, and then only wait until the end of the term to get a result that's going to say, oh, sorry, you failed, and when are you ever going to make that up? So in the old system, you just had these gaps in your foundation. And that's why the system for the high school, you kind of have to have a mind shift to treading in your area now, so just tell me. For me, personally, it was a shift from thinking about, oh, you got 80%, excellent, to you haven't done 20%. That's the shift. So think about it like a building. If you paid an architect to design this building, and the builders get the plan, and the 20% that was the foundation isn't there, is that building going to work? So we're looking at mastery, and we're looking at getting the kids to finish each step, to reflect on it, to understand it, to get the feedback, to give the feedback, to learn how to improve, and then go to the next step. And through all of these processes, you get to a product that is high quality. Because how often did we get the opportunity when we were at school to redo anything? Or to stop halfway through and say, hey, let's do it this way, or have you thought of this, or maybe this way, or wow, you can even do this. How many times do we have those opportunities to do that? And that takes away the anxiety, the fear of failure, because it becomes part of, oh, didn't work this way, so we can do it again that way.
That's why our expectation is that someone will achieve around about an 80% minimum. You've got to change your mindset. Obviously, when you see these kids on TV, they get 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 8. That's a very different type of scale to what we're looking at here. Yeah, and 80% is if you mastered the skills that are required for a person of your age. That's what we're looking at. Yeah. It doesn't necessarily mean you know 80% of your work, which in most cases actually doesn't reflect 80%.
Yes.
So it might be a high school question, but if the scale for high school now has A's and B's and C's, I grew up in the American system, so I'm very familiar with that. I assume that there's an assessment approach that will change because that's numeric. And everything I've seen from the Green School so far has been qualitative, and partly quantitative in terms of the rubric, but not numeric. So in order to give a child a grade, you're going to have a test. Right? You can't have a 0 to 100 subjective scale from a teacher. That there has to be certain measurement in there.
What you're going to get there is a numerical thing. And then we also, when we give out the transcript, which will go to university, we'll have a complete portfolio. And in that we'll have records of all the tests and worksheets and any other kind of normal academic work, but that won't be reflected in that symbol. That'll be a standalone. So we use that to then determine which of those symbols we give or letters.
And you don't just get percentages from tests alone. You can design an assessment around just about any activity that children do. If you think about Greenstone and Quest, you can put a percentage to that. You can, and you can look at you can set up your rubric if you really wanted to, which we don't really want to, but because we have to adhere to certain.
So let me ask the question slightly differently. Right, one of the challenges that you're acutely aware of and working on is the transition out of the green school world into the outside. Right? So whatever we do here as a product outcome, which is the most important thing to us, needs to be understandable by universities, needs to be understandable by the outside world because they're not bought in. So my question is, will there be a combination of more numerical assessments necessary in the high school in order to complete that transition, or will we be able to stick with rubrics all the way through?
Well, we'll show you later. The rubrics will work. Because we do either have to have a diploma, which is been accredited, which we will be having, or they can do SATs.
Perhaps if I
And
could add,
then, okay, sorry.
to add in there, for example, if you're doing in English literature, there'd be a series of essays and assignments which would be done around literature, and that would be more rubric structured. Perhaps for mathematics, there'd be a series of assignments done along the way, but then there'd be a test with some marks attached to it. A science course might have some experimental and practical work, and then a theoretical component. And so there'll be a balance of both.
Can I ask a question? I'm just curious because you say this system reduces stress, something like that. Yeah? How do you measure that? Do you get feedback from the children? How do you know if it doesn't give
I have
them
a
stress?
beautiful example for you. So, when new students want to come to our school, we have a taster day, like you all know, and they come in and we chat to them and they do a little activity just so that we can gauge whether they can think and whether they can write and communicate and if they're language proficient and all that. So we had a child come in the other day. She is a complete and utter math phobic. What do you call it when you're afraid of maths? She's really terrified of maths. It upsets her completely, and the other problem that she has is she has severe test anxiety to the point where she gets panic attacks, proper full-blown panic attacks in a child that is very young still. So she walked in and we welcomed her and she was part of the day, and by the time she got to maths she had to go and sit down and do an activity, and we don't call it a test, but it looks like a test. It looks like a test. We don't approach it that way, but it looks like it's very similar because it's a math thing with sums and you have to answer them. And basically she sat down and Lene said to her, will you please do this activity and let's see where you are, and if you need help you ask. And that's all she needed. And this child who usually gets anxiety attacks and panic attacks when she has to sit down and write a test, that's the smallest bit of evidence I can give you. The smallest bit of evidence is that a child who would, if you took an exam and you put it in front of her and you just closed the heading and didn't call it an exam, that would have taken it away already. So that's the first millimeter of the 10-mile line that we can measure. If I look at the kids, when we are talking about when you have to hand in an assignment, I don't get the question, we don't get the question, is this for marks? Because the moment when you hear that coming from a previous system, when you hear it from marks, the kid will actually finish it and they'll try to do it as to the best of their abilities. We hear questions about the work. We hear questions about, what about this? We hear suggestions. We hear solutions. We hear, please explain this again. That's what we hear. We don't hear, is this for marks? Please, I don't want to take this home. My mom's going to see it. I don't have those conversations anymore. So we don't necessarily go out and measure, but we can feel it and we can see it with the kids around us. Deirdre, would you like to?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, if I look at my own son, I think school, at his previous school, was very anxiety provoking, and since he's been at grade school, I can see that level of anxiety has reduced significantly. He's just generally a lot happier. So,
And if you look at our scope and sequence, can you balance an equation? Can you calculate the number of moles in this chemistry experiment? Can you write an essay in English? And how you would assess that would vary according to the task. So there's an English essay to be done, there's a science prac to be done, there might be a maths assessment to be done. and there will be a range of assessment tools. What we don't have is a year-long course and a 1-hour paper at the end, pass or fail.
Yeah, because
And
that's
oh my goodness, the whole year hangs on this 1 hour. There's a series of assessments along the way, and then an end of course assessment, and so it rewards that child who worked consistently all the way through. But yes, it's rigorous. Yes, it's going to be demanding. Yes, it needs to get them into university. They've got to be able to learn to think for themselves. They've got to develop that work ethic. We're talking today just about teaching children to finish things. And Quest program certainly taught children, how do I finish tasks I've started? So it's not only measuring their academic competence, but have they got the skills to complete tasks? When many children get into university, few graduate. And it's those skills that will enable them to graduate. That's at the heart of our Green School skills and values we wanted to teach them.
And also just allowing them an option in terms of how to be assessed.
Yes.
So I think that's a huge shift as well. So not all children have to be assessed in the same way. I think that's very valuable. So look where their strengths lie and give them options.
And one of the things that Deirdre is really good at, that I'm learning still, is to have the children actually come in and co-create your rubric with you. So they co-create how they are going to be assessed, even at rubric level. So we have the skeleton there, but we give them a little bit of input and say, listen, how would you word this to make it comfortable for you? What would you think is the example? You use this beautiful example of where they had to measure something's efficiency.
Yeah, we decided responsibility.
Yes,
so looking after a pet.
Yes,
What's a level 5 looking after a pet? How does that look to you? What's a level 1? And so that they really had a good understanding of
like
how
that.
that
Because it's a lie.
That's a
It's
five.
a lie, it's a
That's a
truth.
5.
That's a 5.
Good job, Captain.
Yeah. And it's just, we try to make our learning as real as possible, and that's not just referring to our acronym. We really want it to mirror life. We don't have bells. Well, we've got alarm clocks and we've got notifications, but we don't. I think we have it because we had bells at school. If you self-regulate, if you know this is what needs to be done during the day, I have a plan for this, I'm confident in what I'm doing, and I can go out and live my life and make a difference in the world, what better do you want? And those are the skills that are missing in our workforce at the moment, and that's what we're trying to support out there, because our kids are going to live in a world that's quite different from the one that we live in, and the one that we are busy playing around in as adults.
Now, a lot of parents feel that the important thing for school is to master the content, and when you arrive at university, I've been chatting to my supervisor recently, you cover virtually everything you've done in your school career in the first semester. The content is important, it's how you think, the processes that you've learned, and the current education system doesn't have enough space to teach you that. It's so content driven. I'm the national examiner for marine sciences for the IEB, and I've just had a look at the recent CAPS document that came out with marine sciences, 183 pages. That's a summary of the content, a summary. It's ridiculous. You just don't have time to accumulate skills, and these kids are going to university with rote learning, straight A's, and they can't pass first year, which is shocking when you get a candidate with 8 A's in trip and they can't pass first year. And that's why we have this massive dropout rate. You can rote learn some of the content, but when you start doing the high order skills and they can't do it, they just flounder and they leave university. So we have a massive dropout rate, and that's a big issue. And also they lack flexibility. They're used to the kind of confines of a normal classroom, sit down, keep quiet, and spoon feed. And suddenly when they get to university, there's no discipline enforced on them. They've never learned self-discipline because the teachers just shut up, sit down, get on with their work. So those skills they've lost. And that's what we're aiming to do, is to teach them those skills. And any content you can master, as long as you've got those skills, as the thinking ability, problem solving.
And it's also about, what I found profound is, I knew it would make a difference, but I didn't know it would make such a huge difference, is our move to admin block. And I'm not allowed to say open anymore, the declosed spaces. I caused a lot of confusion with open at one point, inside joke. The kids now, they know which lesson is happening, they know what's going to happen, but they never really know where it's going to happen. So we tell them in the mornings, listen, science is going to happen around the corner or in the lab, English is going to happen in Deirdre's class, Afrikaans is out in the veranda. Just doing that gets them, it habitualizes living in a high change situation. We do tell them in advance up to a point, and we have children who really need to be told in advance, and we communicate with them independently. But as far as is possible, we try to get them to adapt to that change, because maths won't always be in the corner. Sometimes it's going to be there, and a lot of it happens outside. We now have an outdoor hour tracker. So we're aiming to get 1,000 hours in. We have a blog about out. We are. See, there's another word I'm not allowed to say is in, out. Good. So, and they find it interesting to go and say, oh, how many hours did we do this week? And then they can go and cover it in. We did cheat with the tour a bit, with the camp.
Oh, that was
It wasn't
good,
cheating.
good hours.
It was good hours, and Andy made sure that they were dead tired with the one day. So it's that flexibility that has to come into how they learn and where they learn. It's also teaching them to accept things when they change. Because also, if you think about when you had to complete a task, you needed to start it and finish it. You didn't get to stop halfway through and look at it again or go and think about it a little bit. You needed to finish it. So that whole pressure of I need to finish this right now in that moment is taken away, alleviating anxiety. And it also helps you to think clearly. Because you can't think if you don't have access, if you don't have executive access. So the moment your pupils dilate, you are not thinking straight. And that's good and bad, because that happens when you're in love, and it also happens when you're under stress. So think clearly. Then we have a tracking system that we've put into place that we are starting to use this term. We have used it independently. We've now combined it so that we can get a snapshot of where each child is going. So for each of the subjects, this is just an example of a template that we're using. We've got grade 6, 7, and 8 here for middle school. And this is basically our scope and sequence that we have on the left-hand side to show what we have taught. And that we do sort of a gap analysis to see what did we not teach this term and why not, and where is it going to fit in later on, or where could we go and look at another subject and say, oh no, it's being duplicated there. Is it a valid duplication? If it's not, we're going to reduce it to increase focus. And on the right-hand side, we have a mastery tracker. And this is a color-coded system. Thank you, SB, for bringing the color coding in. Because it really helps. It's a Michaela. So like you see, we all use it, so it's really cool. So we have, this is now not presented here, but the kids' names are at the top there. And the progress will come then from what we look at in the Google Classroom. I'm going to show you the process now. Just get there. So we start planning with a scope and sequence over here. In Google Classroom, we collect all their work. We do share information with them there, but we are moving from a delivery system to a receptacle. We want to receive the information there, and that becomes their whole portfolio. And we've got a class for each semester. So there's a class per Google Classroom per subject, per semester, that speaks into that semester's report card. So the marks that are relevant for growth are then extracted from there, and it's put into our grade book. And from the grade book, we then go and we have a talk, and we look, and we have an academic review, and then that mark is reflected onto the 1 to 5 in middle school, and it'll be on the handbook.
Is the grade book in Google Classroom as well, or is it independent?
No, it's independent. So there are grades in Google Classroom that they'll see pop up, and they can see, oh, I got so much out of 5 and so much out of 5 for each of them. And that's how they look at their own. And we can set it to have an overall mark, but we don't want to do that. So, because we don't want them to see this and this is an overall mark. Because that's the other thing that doesn't make sense in this kind of learning journey approach is you can't really say this is an average for the subject. Because what are you comparing? Different skills. And you can say, okay, so I've got a lovely cocktail of skills going. It's basically what an average becomes, is this mushy cocktail. It's that jam no one likes. You know, that really red jam that's made up of leftovers. That's what an average is. It's
Fruit jam.
no one's like. What's it called? Fruit cocktail? Or
But
something.
also what happens, it dilutes your progress.
Yeah.
Because if you get a mark that's a term average, you might have done horrifically at the beginning. You're now mastering it completely, but it's reflected as an average. It takes you way back to where you were maybe towards the beginning of the term.
Yeah.
We want to look at where you are now, not average an entire time of development. So that's why we generally go for a snapshot at the end when you get your report. That's where you are,
Where are
right
you
now.
now?
The development goals that you're setting with the student and independently. So say for example, there's 3 terms. Would you set both a term and a year goal, or would you go 1 term at a time in assessing where they are and where they're aiming for?
So we've got a couple of ways to look at that. We've got the year plan per subject. So you've got a year plan for the subject. This has to happen in a year. Or for maths, in maths, for example, Lene looks at it for middle school. It's a 3-year journey. So she's going to see where the child is, and maybe that child has already mastered the first year of middle school, and then she'll start with that child here. But she has to assess that first. So the first term will be her baseline journey of that first semester. And then she'll say, listen, this kid has lots of blocks in place. And then she will move them along where they're supposed to be going. So there is a year plan, yes, for short-term planning. But the long-term plan for middle school is it's a 3-year journey. And by the end of middle school, you need to be able to do these sets of skills for each of the subjects and as a whole. So that's where all the skills are mapped and they are monitored per term, per semester. So that's why we do a 6-month course. And then you get a semester, then you get a report to say this is where you are now, where do you want to be for the next 6 months, where do you want to be for the next 6
Okay,
months.
got it. So that where you are now
yeah.
is assessed against
Yeah.
that period.
Yes,
Like this is at the beginning of the period, we
Yeah.
thought you could get here,
yes.
and you've achieved that.
Yeah.
Or
Or
you've
you
exceeded
haven't.
that, or you haven't achieved
So
that.
how are you going to
So
get
now what do we do
Yeah.
for our plan next
Exactly.
semester in order to keep progress?
Because that's going to also impact how we plan. Because let's say 2 or 3 of the kids didn't get there, then we need to plan for them to actually get through the journey that they need to do. And that's the support plan. Some of the kids may have extended far beyond what we thought they could do. Then we need to support them with an extension plan. And everybody else in between needs to be supported as well. Like you would do in an old-fashioned school, you had your average kids in the middle and you had your fallouts on either side. And you needed to stream them as well if you were doing the job properly there. But this is just a bit more organic.
Perhaps if I could just add in, one of the things we look at in the sort of assessment theory is how reliable are assessments. If you think of a maths exam, if a child wrote the maths exam on a Monday and the same exam on a Tuesday and the same exam on a Wednesday, would they get exactly the same mark? And if they did, it would be a reliable assessment. You just said, they might have a great Monday, they might have had a fight on the way to school on the Tuesday, they might have been ill on the Wednesday, and so that assessment is not particularly reliable. If you are assessing continually along the way, and if you have an end-of-term assessment that allows for a more thought-through approach, it's more likely to be reliable. And the child might hand in a quality essay or a quality maths assignment of the same standard more frequently. So that's what we call it, reliability in assessment. And perhaps just pick up on an earlier question. I think many of us think of assessment in terms of a mark scheme. These are the 10 correct answers. The Orange River, the Nile River, the Amazon River, those are the correct answers out of 10. Whereas a rubric saying, have you shown that you've understood the water cycle of a digestive system? Could you design an experiment that demonstrates that you understand the principle of levers? And yes, has really understood, approaching understanding, not quite there. So a rubric gives you a more broader statement of how well have they mastered those skills, and not a check of, there's one right answer, did you get it, tick, or no, you didn't.
And more qualitative.
Yeah.
So it's equally reliable, but it moves away from there's only one right answer to this question to say an outstanding analysis of work of literature will show that you've understood plot, character, X, Y, and Z, and you've really shown that you've engaged with all the elements of a quality literary assessment.
And it looks like this. So we start with goal setting over here.
Sorry.
Sorry,
Oh,
I just
sorry.
have a question. So, I'm all for no assessments because then it means
It's not
I don't
no
have,
assessment.
yeah, but I mean exam. Because it means I don't have to write the exams either.
Fantastic. Yes, you
Don't
don't
have to study that. But I want to know in terms of the science and maths, there's a certain foundation that your kids need to, they need to know certain things that's absolutely critical in going to a university. What structure or process do you use to get to those basic foundations? Not necessarily exams, but in terms of writing
I can
exams.
measure whether they've got it or not.
So, yeah.
Yeah.
So for chemistry, you need to learn certain things, certain aspects to be able to go to study for a pharmacist, for instance. How do you know that you're teaching the foundation?
We have a curriculum. Yeah.
So
our
that curriculum follows CAPS, or does it follow?
It's CAPS aligned, which means that the content agrees and the skills agree. but we get it from CAPS, and we get it from the American Common Core, and we take the best of all of them. We take the best of all of them, and we put that together, and that is our green school curriculum. So it's not something that we went and said, oh, this would be fun to do, and then we skip everything else. It really is quite structured, and if you look at, I think the most comprehensive one is our maths one. And it's also the one that gives us the most challenges when we want to integrate, because it is so heavy structured. Because all those little blocks have to be in there, and what Lene is really brilliant at is not streaming, but she knows where to go more practical, and she knows where to go more theoretical, and when to do it and how to do it. So she's really structuring a 3-year course. She specifically works in a 3-year course when she speaks about maths. It's about a 3-year course with these kids, and she knows that if she has assessed the children in grade 6, and she knows exactly where those little holes are in her gap analysis, she'll see where the holes are, not because she didn't teach it, but that's not yet mastered. So then she can see, okay, this needs to go into my next term's planning until they get it. Because that's the big thing. We make sure that they have mastered the block and that the whole doesn't stay.
There's a document that was shared with us last year. I'm sure you guys still share it, and I haven't looked at it because it answered my question the first time, where I think Andy laid out the CAPS curriculum and the American system and all of the subject matter learning outcomes that were required. And then there was the green school map of, look, here's your list of 1,000 things. Here's our order of operations for the 1,000 things we're doing. And now our assessment system will make sure we've covered these and make sure that you've learned them, but we'll do it our way. And it won't be methodical and black and white and, you know, basically completely controlled like the CAPS curriculum. It's a lot more fluid, it's a lot more flexible, but at the end of the day, from an outsider's perspective, I think the accreditation of the school relies on our kids going through your system. Have they learned the things they needed to learn? They're also going to learn things that other schools don't teach, which I think is the reason why most of us are here. But we've had the same question about, yeah, but the nuts and bolts. How are you measuring the nuts and bolts? We know that we've got higher order thinking, we know we've got problem solving, we know we've got happier kids, but will they be able to stand up at this basic skill level? And I don't know if you've seen that document, but that helped me a lot. Like, I spent an hour on it, and now I'll never look at it again, because the question was answered, they've got it, but it gave me quite a bit of comfort in seeing how that works.
So normally that's what, which spoke about the scope and sequence, that's a bit of technical language, but the scope is what you're teaching this year. So we're teaching energy systems, we're teaching levers, we're teaching chemistry, we're teaching physiology, and each of those, you know, there's a very careful curriculum there. As I said, I've referenced it against the South African curriculum, so you'll be learning all the key concepts and skills. And then the sequence is, what do you learn in grade 8, grade 9, 10, 11, and 12? And as you've gone through your school career, have you learned all the key things you need to know in the science curriculum or the English curriculum? So it's scope and sequence.
We don't necessarily silo them in a subject. So one science will then teach science, and English will then teach English. So we'll be teaching themes.
Yeah.
So we'll deal with essay writing. If you're writing essay in life science, for example, Celri would mark that for an English mark, or do the corrections and then look at the grammar and the structure and all that kind of thing. So it's quite fluid. You still cover the content, but certain minimum content. Because content's not our whole emphasis. Maths and languages is quite important, obviously, because the SATs are based on that, and that's going to be used for entrance. But the other subjects we're a little bit more fluid, and we obviously then do more of a mixed curriculum there. But we're still taking those individual subjects and choosing the core skills that we need in the core content that we need. I mean, so the kids will have to know what an atom looks like and that kind of thing. I mean, we're not going to throw that out in the back.
And it's, I think one of the most challenging conversations we often have to have, not often have to have, but we have had to have in the past, is when a parent has a child that has to go to a school outside of the green school way of doing things, or they have a sibling in another school and they have a child here and they want to compare the books. We don't use books. We don't have textbooks, there's no homework, where's your test results? It is, I think that's one of the shifts that we need to make, and that we need to understand and get to feel comfortable with. And it's not easy to feel comfortable with something that is different. because change for humans is not it's a constant that we just refuse to get comfortable with. So you can't, what we often ask our parents is, please don't compare what your child did today in this class to what happened in another class, because it's not done in the same sequence, it's not done in the same spaces. We change it around every year, and to meet the needs of the kids who are sitting in front of us, because it's also, that's another thing. We don't sit with I don't do my prep this year and just open my file and go, oh yes, we can just do this again next year. It has to be adapted to what the kids find interesting and to what is relevant in the world during that time. So that's also something that it becomes difficult. I mean, we've had parents in the past who have taken a report card from grade school and a report card from another country and said, okay, my kid did like this there, why aren't they doing like this here? Well, actually, they are doing a little bit better if you read it differently, if you read it in the context that we're doing it, because it's really comparing orange with square. So and it's a big shift for us, and it's something, if you need to talk about it, come and talk to us. Because it's going to help us understand your needs as well, because it's one of our things, our middle school theme for next year is community, and we want to have more sit-downs with you. And we want to get you involved in how we talk and how we speak and where we're growing, what we're doing. Like we have the kids involved. The kids are involved. They were involved in drawing up the plans for the new building. We didn't get you involved in that. So we showed you what it looked like. But we want you to become part of our family and part of the process, because it's a triangle. And each one of those corners is as important as the other one. We can't do anything without all three of them in the right place. And there's a big shift between primary school parenting and high school parenting, especially if your kid doesn't bring homework home. There's no test. How do I know what's going on in my child's life?
And if you say, what did you do in school?
Nothing.
Say nothing.
Nothing. Please don't believe them, and we won't believe what comes in the
What
morning.
did you do? I was outside.
Yeah.
Nothing.
We found a snake.
Yes. It didn't eat anyone.
What great.
On that, I had snakes in my face during lunch. They would come to you, look what we found. Anyway. Yeah, Jaden.
Did they still pick them up?
It was so cool. It was really cool. It was like, that's a snake, okay, it's a safe one.
Yes.
That was one of those moments.
But they say maybe, what do you do? And they say, oh, nothing funny. But then you ask a little more. And then yesterday I did an test of math. Oh yes, and how it goes? So well, Mama. Oh yes, and what do you do? Oh, we went for counting cars because there are a problem with a lot of cars in the school. And we are wondering if it's a better schedule. Oh, and we put it in an Instagram.
Instagram.
Yeah. And I thought, oh my God, they are learning studies. They are learning that there are a problem. We are going to do a research. We are going to put it in a paper, and we are going to think if it's a better option for everybody. It's not the content; it's an attitude in life. I'm in love with this school. Now you can see more than a content, an attitude.
And the thing is, we also teach them how questions work and how they are put together, because they have to craft questions. It's not easy to ask a question, and it's not easy to know the difference between the different types of questions. But if you know how to build a question, you can answer any question. And that takes you back to whatever they're going to do after school, and whatever paper they're going to get. They will be able to understand that. You've had a question for a while.
Yes.
I can feel it.
Currently in the normal schools, you get to choose your subjects, I think in grade 10.
It's your question.
Yeah. What is going to happen?
We sort of hopping way.
Yeah.
Do you
Okay.
want the-
What grade 9 and 10 in the options? Okay. The.
Where do you want to go?
Okay.
Which one do you want to go to?
We need to move on. We're
Where
going
do
to
you wanna
skip
go?
some of this because I think we've
Some of
passed
it's
that.
good.
Okay, let's do next one. Next one. Next one. And one more. Okay,
Yeah.
so this is grade 9 and 10. And you'll see they have to earn these credits in those particular subjects. There are no options here. Okay, so we cover, this is the grounding grade 9 and 10 where you learn your basic skills. And then, we want to go to the next one. 11 and 12, you'll see with 11, we've got 3 compulsories, which are your 3 that we would suggest you take right through to grade 12 if you're going to be taking sciences or maths or anything at university. obviously maths through to grade 12 because your SATs are based on that, and then obviously languages are also compulsory. But we recommend taking maths through to grade 12 and doing that. And then what you'll notice, grade 11, you've got at the bottom here these 3 electives. And they can come from any of those that they're not taking. So any of those categories. But then within those categories, for example, science, you can take physics, chemistry, marine sciences, you name it. So there can be a whole range of topics. Obviously, here we have to have someone who is skilled in that area so we can actually guide with it. And then grade 12, you'll see we've got more of a choice. We're only down to 1 compulsory, which is language, and then 4 electives, and then you've got your Greenstone project, which is all basically done on research, where you follow a project that piques your interest, and that takes about 6 to 7 months.
But would you have enough teachers to do that?
Not now, but as a school, we've put in place a plan. So as we go through progressively from year to year over the next 4 years until we fill up, we've got a plan in place to.
So that
Oh, yeah,
teachers will only be studied like a.
So we'll be only getting, we won't be at this level, we don't have the 11s and 12s at the moment. But that's how it's going to progress. And then all of those will add up to 26. So you'll see, we just want to go back, grade 9 and 10, you're in your 7 credits. And a credit is a year's work, or 2 semesters that has been passed. And then these halves are 1 semester or half a year's work. So you accumulate 7 in both 9 and 10, and then 11 and 12 drops down to 6. So it's more in depth, focus, more academic rigor, so you do fewer subjects. And the capstone one, which is basically your levers presentation, mentioned later on, it's a 30-minute TED talk. So you reflect on your entire passage through, your problems, your successes, your issues that you had, complete reflection. That's the final project.
So like accounting might become.
Yeah, no, accounting will be in there. So accounting will be in one of the humanities. It's in humanities. So geography, history, accounting, all those will be in there. So there's a lot of subdivisions in those topics.
Just the key things are, it's a 4-year program. Over the course of 4 years, you need to accumulate 26 credits. And you can see there how many you need to accumulate each year. What it does allow is a lot more choice than perhaps in the South African curriculum. I think you and I had a choice, history, geography, that's it. And so it was really a one-size-fits-all curriculum. This will allow that child who's into arts and digital design to choose more arts and digital design electives and come out with their core subjects, maths and English, but with a more arts and digital design approach to their tertiary studies. The child who's really keen on maths and science would pick up a whole lot more maths and science electives and options and be heading towards an accounting direction. So it would enable a good deal more flexibility and choice. And of course the challenge for us as a school is to say, well, what mix of teachers are we going to need to be able to offer that widest range of choice and to be able to provide that will grow with time. But know that in terms of university admissions, if you look at any of our local universities and international universities, they really look at your maths and English grades and then your overall score, and they want to see your entire transcript, but those two are the key subjects they'll be looking at. And then your capstone project is something you've really researched. You said, while I was at school, yeah, I got good marks, but I also got involved in a community outreach program. We went to Durban, we helped with some flood relief, I got involved with community service. There was a whole lot of other things that really strengthen your university application. Because what universities are looking for is which of all these applicants with good grades is actually going to graduate from my faculty and who will go on to postgrad study. That's the metric that universities are looking at. And they're looking for indicators of how do we know that this person will graduate as an undergrad and hopefully as a postgrad. And so that there's a much greater focus in university admission. Just show me your whole portfolio. Not
So
just
that's
simply
what the portfolio will be. It's
your one page.
Essential document, which documents literally the entire progress from 9 through to 12.
I mean, Alba has now this week arranged for our kids who went to KZN to actually make a formal video reflecting on what we did in KZN. And now my grade 6 child already has a school leavers portfolio piece ready because she went and snuck her with. Very responsible parenting. She went with and she experienced the whole KZN situation where she had to go and help everybody else at the same level. And she has that video that she can now go and put into her repertoire, into her portfolio. the next one that's going to come, and we're formalizing all the quest videos are going to go in there. So all of those things are documented in their final portfolio. So when you take that mix to university, they're going to go, yes, this kid can memorize from another school. This one can think.